During one of the meetings of Dragon Age Inquisition with the executives at EA, I was asked a couple of questions that at the time seemed a little strange, but I've been sort of picking at for the last 8 years or so. First question was, what do I do in your game? And second, why do I do it? You have to remember that this question is coming from somebody who's worked in games for a long time, but has worked in games that are very different from RPGs. In a game like FIFA, what do I do? Well, I kick a soccer ball around, I move my players around, and why? I'm trying to score more goals so that I can win a game of soccer. Maybe I'm playing one of the modes that does a season, in which case what I'm trying to do is to win several games in order to get to a specific championship and then win that championship. But it's building from very small number of things that I do for a relatively small victory condition, and then maybe it collects those victory conditions together into a larger set of victory conditions. In a game like Battlefield, I am moving around a battlefield, I can crouch behind cover, and I can shoot my gun to take out opponents, again, to score more points or take an objective or hold the line in order to win a match. But the answer to these questions in an RPG is actually more complicated. It's relatively easy to answer the what do I do question, because what I do is just a list of your features, your systems, your UIs. And yeah, that list is a lot longer than the list in FIFA or in Battlefield, but you can do it. And actually at that meeting, I basically fell into some sort of weird fugue state and basically did exactly that. But the second question, the why question, is actually a lot more interesting. If you have a Dungeons and Dragons manual or you have another tabletop RPG manual, go pull down that book and flip it to the first page or two. Chances are on that first page, there's going to be a section, anywhere from a couple of paragraphs to a whole page, which will be titled something like, what is a role-playing game? And that section is there to make the attempt to try to explain that role-playing games are different than other kinds of board games, that the goals are different, that the way you play is different. And even the 5th edition Player's Handbook for D&D still has a section right up front that does that same thing, that tries to explain what a role-playing game is. And I think that's because tabletop RPGs correctly recognize that if their industry is to remain valid, to remain viable, they need to be bringing new people into the hobby. And sometimes those people come in through other people who can explain the way the game is played, the way that it works, can walk them through the steps. But sometimes it's going to come from people that were really just interested in My Little Pony and picked up the My Little Pony RPG and don't have any idea what an RPG is and definitely need that explanation to get started. And I realized over the last 8 years that maybe digital RPGs, computer RPGs, have forgotten this fact, have forgotten that RPGs aren't obvious, that the explanation of what you do and why you do it is potentially missing from most RPGs. We tutorialize how to walk or swing a sword and cast the spell, but we don't tutorialize the interaction with the story, the interaction with the world that is such a fundamental part of the enjoyment of an RPG. And I think that that is to our detriment. By not doing that, we're not giving people the opportunity to enter into the genre who otherwise might fully enjoy it if they could just be given the tools to understand what they were interacting with. Because if you try to play Dragon Age Inquisition as if it's FIFA, you can build up your characters to be the best at fighting. That's only going to get you so far. You need to understand that extra little bit in order to be able to get the full experience out of a game like Dragon Age or a game like The Witcher or a game like Skyrim. And I think that our part of the industry, the storytelling, the role-playing part of the industry, needs to think about ways that we can onboard people, not just to our games, but to the genre itself, and give them the best opportunity we can to have the fullest experience that we can. Let me see if I can come up with an example here. In FIFA, your series of actions are very linearly leading towards your final outcome. If you're playing in a season, the way you win a season is by winning games. The way you win games is by scoring more goals. And then within the game itself, the way you score more goals is by having better ball possession and ultimately getting the ball into the net. You can imagine potentially games adding extra complexity to that, potentially giving you the opportunity to play an injured player, which might improve your chance of winning an individual game, but hurt your chances longer term. But RPGs live in that ambiguity of decision making, in that challenging of the player to think about different potential outcomes. And most games aren't asking for that challenge. And you want that. You want them to engage into the story, to consider the different possibilities. But that's something they're not coming to you necessarily having the knowledge of that possibility space. So if you don't teach them that this is about engaging in the story, about engaging in the world, about engaging in the moral questions, then the best they can bring is an interaction with the more mechanical challenges of the game. They can consume the story, but the branching potentially becomes almost non-existent because they're not engaging in that possibility space about this being part of the experience itself. So you need to onboard them to that possibility, to give them the understanding that an RPG isn't exactly about winning, it's about the journey, it's about the story, it's about the world. That's the piece that needs to be taught, is when you're playing an RPG, there is an ending, there is a win, but that's not the ultimate goal. The goal is the path along the way, potentially even having players who will choose a worse ending because they like the story outcome better. Computer role-playing games don't tend to go viral. One of the reasons for that is this almost subconscious gatekeeping that happens with a lot of RPG players. They deeply enjoy the genre, but they have this feeling that their friends won't get it, that it's too hard to understand. They don't know how to explain it to them, so they don't necessarily try. I don't think it's coming from a place of them thinking that they're smarter than their friends, though it might be. But I think we, as the developers of these kinds of games, have the opportunity, the possibility to give our existing players better tools to help explain to their friends why actually this is super fun. They should play this game because they're going to enjoy it immensely. In a tabletop RPG, if you know what an RPG is, if you've been playing D&D since the mid-'80s like I have, then you often just sort of take a quick glance at that page, flip it, and move on. But it's still there. So something to think about, something for us, I think, to chew on as we move into newer and newer generations of storytelling and role-playing, that what I do and why I do it isn't immediately obvious to all of your potential players. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources this channel needs to keep running. If you are interested in becoming a member, there is a link down in the description. If you found this video interesting, if it maybe gave you something to chew on for the next 8 years, give this video a thumbs up so that the YouTube algorithm knows that people are interested in it. Share it with someone else, maybe to spark a discussion between the two of you. Have you ever convinced one of your non-RPG players to play a role-playing game? Let me know down in the comments how you did that, because that could form the seed of a possible path forward. I will see you again soon. Thank you.